Well, thanks all for staying with us here on Sunrise Live on E on this Friday morning as we continue with the conversations. It's time for our Issue of the Week discussion. Now, in 2010, the Minister of Basic Education, admitted that sexual abuse is becoming a major problem in public schools. In actual fact, the problem of educator sexual misconduct is not a recent development. In 2002 already, it was reported, get this, in 2002 it was reported that a third of the South African girls raped were raped by educators. Now, in trying to alleviate the situation, the South African Council for Educators has proposed that teachers found guilty of sexually assaulting pupils or even having relationships with them be named and shamed in the Government Gazette. So joining us in studio to delve further into the matter is SACE Spokesperson Themba Ndhlovu, as well as a Section 27 Attorney Kate Paterson. And later on, we'll be joined on the line by Satu to give us their perspective on the matter. But at home, we want you to be part of our conversation this morning. Remember that number to dial is 011 447 1742. Alternatively 2570. Also, do feel free to reach us on our Facebook as well as our Twitter pages. Thank you so much to the both of you for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Themba, let's start off with you. This is, and I want us to get into the meat of the issue. You guys are proposing that the teachers that have been found guilty of sexual misconduct actually put their names on the Government Gazette. Is that true?
We are working on that actually to have a register where teachers who are found guilty of sexually abusing our learners are put on that register. And currently we are doing it on our website, where we're putting the teachers' names, where every employer can check with our website to say whether the teacher is fit and proper. But we feel that is not a deterrent enough. We are looking at how best can we make that a deterrent. And one of the things that Council has done is that we have sought legal opinion on this matter, and we've been advised that we need to amend our act so that it allows us to can then name these teachers who are guilty of these offences.
Kate, it's a very interesting perspective as well, because on the article in itself, I mean, you were quoted as saying that perhaps it's because SACE is actually undercapacitated, number one. And also, number two is the fact that there's a failure of communication between the South African Council for Educators as well as the department, the Provincial Department of Education. Expand more on that, those words that you were saying.
Sure, well, especially in relation to the proposal on the table now, I'd be very interested to see the full motivation for it. Because in my view, the major problem, as I said, is that SACE is undercapacitated and that there's underreporting of sexual violence in schools.
Great, hold your thought there. Why is there underreporting of sexual violence in schools? And I'm going to go first, just based on the fact, and here's the problem. The number one problem is because this research was done between 2008 and 2012. It's 2017, 5 years on. I would suppose, right, all things considered, that perhaps the figures are even way different, right? So that 2012 figures showed that those teachers that were found guilty, not even accused, those who were found guilty, 13 of them are currently working. Those who were found, according to this study that was done, those who were found accused of sexual misconduct, 49 of them were not guilty, 4 of them were handed over to the police, 4 of them were not charged, 3 resigned, and the others as well, others were dead, or the others were actually still working in the schools, were even given written warnings. So what's going on there?
Let me indicate firstly that one of the things that we raised earlier was that there's a question of underreporting of these cases. Remember, whatever cases we're dealing with, the SACE are those that are reported to us. But the fact of the matter is that there are quite a lot of other cases that go unreported.
How much are we talking here? Because I think that the problem is that we never get to the figures. Teachers, and let me be frank about this, teachers having sexual relations or inappropriate relationships or relationships with learners. Where are the figures in 2017 standing? What are we looking at?
We're looking at an increase in the number of incidences that we're getting.
1 in 4 every day, 1 in 2. Where are we right now, Tim?
One of the things that I can indicate safely to you is that with all our programs where we reach out to society, we're getting more people being aware of where they can report these cases. That is why if we're looking at the figures, you look at comparing figures of last year, for argument's sake, we had a lot of cases of sexual misconduct which precipitated the council to look at cases of misconduct, corporal punishment, and so on. But
so in other words, we can safely say right now that it's actually on the increase, sexual misconduct specifically.
The question of reporting the cases, it is now on the increase. We may not be able to say whether is it the cases that are on the increase or not, but the fact of the matter that because everybody now is aware of what they could do in an event they're confronted with that situation, they're reporting more and more of these cases.
Off air, while we're having this conversation, you actually gave a very realistic perspective of what's going on the ground. You say that when parents report this, or when young learners report this to the Department of Education, the process could take up to 6 months, and unfortunately there's like a 50-50 chance that something will be done. And on the other side, when you lay a criminal charge now, that the process is just even more traumatizing for the victim.
Yeah, just to break it down a little bit. So the parents or teachers or whoever the learner has spoken to should report directly to the Department of Education. Then the Department of Education needs to investigate the matter.
How long does that take?
It depends, but it can take, I think, up to a year is the longest that I have seen. And then you have your disciplinary hearing, whereafter there can be an appeal. And by the time you get to the sanction, which would be either the teacher being dismissed or warned or
But then it says here that most of them are actually being fined and given a written warning.
Apparently, which I am flabbergasted by, to be frank. I would think that any person found guilty of any kind of sexual misconduct should be dismissed.
What happens to the teacher during the 6 months? What happens to the teacher? What happens to the learner? Do they remain in the school? Are they suspended? Do they go on special leave? Where's the teacher?
There are a few different things that can happen. The teacher can be moved to another school or can be suspended for that period. Alternatively, the learner could be moved to another school. The criminal process takes longer even than that, mostly. And remember, in both of these processes, the learner would have to give evidence.
How?
Well, the nature of these cases is that it's one word against another person's word normally. There usually isn't very much extrinsic evidence that can be used. So it will be a person's testimony. And that child should be protected, and usually is protected to an extent. So they'll be in a separate room and they'll be able to speak through an intermediary usually. But they still are subject to cross-examination. They still know that the teacher...
They're still going to be subject to cross-examination.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm making this realistic now. This happens in primary school. So a 7-8-year-old, you're telling me is going to be subjected to cross-examination to determine whether or not a teacher should be fined, which is, according to the stats, fined mostly or not, for a year?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. On that note, we're gonna speaking to Satu on the line. Joining us on the line is Ndhlovu, Satu, Deputy General Secretary. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Nkosana. I mean, we're hearing about the misconduct of educators, but from your stance as Satu, how do you then best sort of zero in and really ensure an outcome that is beneficial for the person that is the victim here, and in this case, the learner?
Good morning and thanks for having us. Look, our view is that teachers as professionals, teachers as parents are having the responsibility to take care of our children. I mean, we bring them to school as parents with the hope that teachers will protect them, will love them, and will really care for them just like they would be caring for their own children. So as a union, in fact, we are against, in fact, any teacher who would be conducting themselves in such unprofessional a kind of way. We will not be protecting such teachers.
Yeah, but that's the question is, what is being done to ensure that, in fact, the pressure is put on teachers to carry themselves out in an appropriate manner? I understand that you're speaking against it, but speaking against it and acting against it actively, I'm sure you'd appreciate there are two different things altogether.
Yes, I appreciate that, but you must also remember that many of these cases are not reported to us directly as a union. Many a times we'll hear them through the media, we'll hear them when cases are presented at the level of SACE. So it's quite difficult for us to go around sniffing and getting these cases up until they're reported to us. That's why we are saying at the point of them being reported. Well, of course, in terms of law, you would know that we have a responsibility to represent that member, to make sure that the member is given a fair hearing, because somebody will have to be proven guilty. It's only then that we will have to change our attitude. But of course, we have to follow it up until it reach its final.
What do you say about those individuals that have been found guilty? And I'm just looking at the figures that were compiled until 2012. We're speaking to Themba here saying that unfortunately they are witnessing an increase, whether it's from an increase of reporting or an increase on the cases themselves. So what happens to those teachers? Because here the facts are stating that actually those that have been found guilty, according to this report, 13 of them are even in their jobs currently, in other words, the chances of them molesting or assaulting another learner, you can imagine, is really high, if it has not already happened.
In fact, we're saying they should be exposed. That's why we are calling on our structures at the level of the schools to also assist us to expose these teachers, because we feel like it's wrong for them to be abusing our learners in that kind of thing. You remember, we are part of the council as well, as Themba would know. We are part of the discussion, looking at best ways of exposing these teachers.
So do you support then the proposal there made by SACE to actually name and shame them on the Government Gazette?
Of course, for as long as we won't be violating their rights. So that's why Themba is correct, that we'll have to look in terms of the legality of it, so that we don't find ourselves in a situation whereby we defame their character and perhaps they sue the council. Yeah. So we'll have to look at the application of that, but exposing them is what we are supporting as a union.
Well, thank you very much for that. Nkosana Ndhlovu, who's a SATU Deputy General Secretary, giving us his perspective on the matter there as well. Time I want to bring you into this conversation on the other side. Allow me to play devil's advocate for risk of sounding really unpopular this morning. Those learners that are actually, and the fact is it happens, those learners that are actively pursuing the teachers. So in other words, a 16-year-old develops a crush on a business economics teacher. Apologies to all business economics teachers right now. Develops a crush on a business economics teacher, pursues them, or behaves in an inappropriate manner towards that teacher. What protection is there now for that teacher? Because I can imagine that for that individual, it's very difficult to come to work and to be in the presence of a young girl who's going to be constantly seducing or luring you or trying to get your attention in whichever way or form.
I think it's important that we understand that as you assume the position of a teacher, you're assuming the position of a parent. Those kids would do, we're getting these cases every day that kids are seducing teachers and so on and so on. But we're saying teachers must remain parents. And obviously a teacher engaging with a learner on a parental basis, showing the learner that it is not correct for the learner to be pursuing a teacher in a particular manner. That's a role what the parent should be playing on those kids. So it's not a matter of teachers.
So in other words, just understand the fact that you're a parent.
Parent. Teachers must just understand that they are parents. And therefore their role is to educate and bring up these children as responsible citizens. So if as a teacher you're going to tell us that you fell into the trap because the learner was seducing you, it means you have not played your role as a parent.
There are those that technically believe that because of the young learners, especially the ladies, also being seduced or wearing short skirts, that this is what fuels the problem. On the other side, I do not want to leave the boy child out of this conversation. This is also happening to boy children by female educators.
That's correct.
Yeah.
In actual fact, that alibi that teachers use, that kids are wearing short skirts and whatever, is what we hear every day. But we always argue that some of us are parents of girl children. We normally in the mornings when we were all in a rush to school, to work, crisscross each other on the corridors, half naked and whatever, but nothing says to the teacher, I can sleep with my child. Why? Then when you get to a school, you find a young girl wearing whatever short skirt or whatever you, then you tend to be seduced by that kid. It's an irony.
Yeah.
Actually, it can be a valid argument. It is a fact that if children are not wearing properly, as a parent, you need to play a role in advising kids to wear properly. You are also trying to help those children as they go out of the schoolyard, not to be exposed to other criminal elements that could be there. Yeah. So as a teacher, you can't just make use of that as an example, that, or as a reason that I fell in love with this girl because of the short skirt. No, that's out of order. That can't be correct.
What happens now to learners that may be watching this, or even to educators that may be watching this and are feeling as though no matter what they do, I mean, given the time period that you've quite articulated there, Kate, it's a troublesome and it's traumatic, I'm thinking, for the victim. What do they do? If I feel like my teacher is either touching me inappropriately, is speaking to me inappropriately, is advancing at me inappropriately, where is my first point of contact where I can get effective help?
I'd say first speak to a teacher that you trust, if there is one, and your principal. Make sure that there is an adult involved who will help you through the process. Remember, even if the disciplinary process takes a long time or the criminal process takes a long time, it does help to just have sanctions like a teacher being suspended or moved to a different school, or you moving to a different school. So your first port of call is to protect yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe also having reported to the teacher or the principal, but I think we would advise reporting to their parents. It's more important to us because one of the roles parents must play is to protect their children. So once a child has reported to me as a parent, it means I can then have to take over the matter. It becomes me as a parent now who takes the responsibility over it. And we are calling also on teachers and principals where learners report these matters, not to try and sweep these cases under the carpet. They need to bring that to our attention because part of our code of ethics says a teacher who has knowledge of any matter has a responsibility to report that to SACE.
Yeah. And I think that on the other side of that as well is the Employment of Educators Act in itself that actually does stipulate this. We have to leave our conversation there this morning.